Daniel Harper grew up in a small, quiet town called Silver Ridge. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find on postcards or travel brochures. The streets were lined with old brick buildings, some crumbling under years of neglect, and the air always seemed to carry a faint smell of damp earth from the nearby woods. But what made Silver Ridge stand out, or rather what Daniel remembered most about it, wasn't its appearance. It was the stories. Stories whispered behind closed doors, stories shared cautiously among neighbors, and stories buried deep beneath layers of fear. From a young age, Daniel had a knack for noticing things others overlooked. While his friends played baseball or climbed trees after school, he sat on the porch steps watching people pass by. The way they walked, how they avoided eye contact when someone important came into view, and the subtle shifts in their expressions when certain names were mentioned. His father, Thomas Harper, often told him, "Son, if you want to understand this world, pay attention to what people don't say." Those words stuck with Daniel like glue. Silver Ridge might have looked peaceful on the surface, but underneath lay cracks filled with secrets. One incident in particular left an indelible mark on Daniel's life. When he was just 10 years old, his best friend Jamal disappeared one summer evening. Everyone said Jamal ran away because his family was struggling financially, but Daniel knew better. He remembered seeing 2 police cars parked outside Jamal's house earlier that day. He recalled hearing raised voices through the thin walls of their trailer home. And then, silence. No explanation. No answers. Just another missing person statistic swept under the rug. That night, as Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling, something inside him shifted. For the first time, he felt anger. Not the childish tantrum kind, but a slow-burning fire that refused to go out. Why hadn't anyone done anything? Why did it feel like the rules didn't apply equally to everyone? These questions haunted him, for years, shaping the man he would eventually become. As he grew older, Daniel threw himself into academics, determined to leave Silver Ridge behind. School became his sanctuary, a place where he could focus on something other than the unfairness around him. Teachers noticed his sharp mind and encouraged him to aim high. By the time he graduated high school, Daniel had earned scholarships to prestigious universities across the country. Leaving Silver Ridge felt bittersweet. While part of him longed to escape the suffocating atmosphere, another part worried he was abandoning those who couldn't leave. Still, he promised himself he wouldn't forget where he came from. College opened doors Daniel never imagined possible. At first, he struggled to adapt to the fast-paced environment and diverse crowd. Coming from a predominantly white rural town, he felt out of place surrounded by students from all walks of life. But instead of retreating into himself, Daniel embraced the opportunity to learn. He joined clubs, attended lectures, and listened intently to every story people shared. Each conversation added a new layer to his understanding of injustice. Not just in Silver Ridge, but everywhere. It was during his sophomore year that Daniel discovered his true calling. A guest speaker visited campus, a former FBI agent named Agent Laura Mendez. She spoke passionately about her work investigating corruption within government agencies. Her voice carried authority, yet compassion shone through her words. "Justice isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about making sure no one feels invisible anymore." That sentence resonated deeply with Daniel. After the talk, he approached her nervously, asking countless questions about her career path. To his surprise, she took the time to answer each one thoughtfully, even offering advice on how to pursue a similar trajectory. Inspired, Daniel decided to major in criminal justice. Over the next few years, he worked tirelessly, balancing coursework with internships at local law enforcement offices. Every experience reinforced his belief that change was possible, but only if good people stepped up to fight for it. Graduation day arrived sooner than expected, and Daniel stood proudly alongside his classmates, diploma in hand. Yet, unlike many of his peers celebrating job offers from corporate firms, he set his sights higher. He wanted to join the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. The application process was grueling. Physical fitness tests pushed his body to its limits. Background checks scrutinized every detail of his past, and interviews challenged his mental fortitude. But Daniel persevered, drawing strength from memories of Jamal and countless others, whose voices had been silenced. Finally, after months of waiting, he received the letter he'd been hoping for: acceptance into the FBI Academy. Training at Quantico tested everything Daniel thought he knew about himself. Days started before sunrise and ended long after sunset, filled with rigorous exercises, tactical drills, and classroom sessions. Instructors demanded perfection, leaving little room for error. Some recruits buckled under the pressure, dropping out halfway through. Not Daniel. If anything, the challenges fueled his determination. He reminded himself daily why he was there. Not for glory or recognition, but to make a difference. One instructor, Agent Marcus Hale, took notice of Daniel's relentless drive. During a particularly tough obstacle course exercise, Daniel injured his ankle but refused to quit. Instead, he gritted his teeth and completed the task despite the pain. Later, Agent Hale pulled him aside and said, "You've got heart, kid. Don't lose that." Those words stayed with Daniel throughout his training and beyond. By the time graduation rolled around, Daniel had earned respect from both instructors and fellow recruits. Standing tall in his crisp suit, badge gleaming, on his chest he felt a mix of pride and humility. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. Little did he know fate had plans far greater and darker than he could have anticipated. Years passed, and Daniel climbed the ranks quickly, earning promotions thanks to his dedication and unshakable moral compass. Colleagues admired his ability to remain calm under pressure and his unwavering commitment to fairness. By the age of 35, he achieved what many considered impossible, becoming one of the youngest FBI directors in history. The media hailed him as a rising star, praising his innovative strategies and leadership skills. But behind closed doors, Daniel remained grounded, remembering the lessons learned in Silver Ridge. Despite his success, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that his biggest challenge still lay ahead. Somewhere out there, shadows loomed larger than ever, waiting for someone brave enough to shine a light. And though he didn't realize it yet, destiny was about to place him smack in the middle of a storm that would test not only his resolve, but also his humanity. Daniel Harper's rise to the top of the FBI was no accident. His hard work, sharp instincts, and unwavering commitment to justice had earned him respect across the nation. But as he stood in his tailored suit, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror, Daniel couldn't help but feel uneasy. Tonight was different. He wasn't attending a routine meeting or briefing. Instead, he was heading to a gala hosted by one of the most powerful police departments in the country, the Silver City Police Department. Silver City wasn't too far from where Daniel grew up, and its reputation loomed large over the region. Known for its strict law enforcement practices, the department prided itself on maintaining order. But whispers of corruption and abuse of power followed it like a shadow. For years, allegations of racial profiling, excessive force, and cover-ups circulated quietly among activists and victims' families, yet nothing stuck. No investigations went deep enough, no evidence surfaced publicly, and no one dared to challenge the towering figures at the helm: Chief Marcus Reed and Deputy Commissioner Harold Grayson. As Daniel stepped into the sleek black car waiting outside his apartment, he reminded himself why he agreed to attend this event. It wasn't just about networking or politeness, it was an opportunity. Rumors had reached him recently about suspicious activities within the department, including mishandled cases involving minorities. If there was even a shred of truth to these claims, Daniel knew he had a responsibility to investigate further. Still, walking into the Lion's Den made his stomach churn. The venue for the gala was breathtaking, a grand ballroom inside a historic hotel with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and golden accents lining the walls. As Daniel entered, he was greeted by polite nods and forced smiles from officers, politicians, and influential citizens mingling under soft classical music. Waiters weaved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne flutes, while photographers snapped pictures of dignitaries posing near the stage. Despite the opulence, the atmosphere felt tense, almost suffocating. Everyone seemed to be watching everyone else, gauging alliances and rivalries. Daniel spotted Chief Reed immediately. Tall and broad-shouldered, the man exuded authority, commanding attention wherever he went. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his uniform gleamed with medals that spoke of decades of service, or so they claimed. Beside him stood Deputy Commissioner Grayson, shorter but equally imposing, his piercing eyes scanning the room like a hawk hunting prey. Both men radiated arrogance, their presence dominating the space. "Director Harper," a voice called out, interrupting Daniel's observations. Turning around, he saw Mayor Evelyn Carter approaching, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Dressed in an elegant emerald gown, she extended her hand warmly. "So glad you could join us tonight." "Thank you for having me, Mayor Carter," Daniel replied, shaking her hand firmly. "It's quite an impressive gathering." "Yes, it is," she said, glancing toward Reed and Grayson. "We're fortunate to have such dedicated leaders keeping our city safe." "Dedicated?" Daniel bit back a sarcastic remark. From what he'd heard, dedication wasn't exactly the word he'd used to describe them. Instead, he nodded politely and excused himself, making his way toward the buffet table to grab a drink. He needed a moment to collect his thoughts before engaging with anyone else. It didn't take long for Chief Reed to notice Daniel lingering near the edge of the room. With a smirk playing on his lips, Reed approached, flanked by Grayson and another officer whose name Daniel didn't catch. Up close, Reed's demeanor shifted slightly. His smile widened, but his eyes remained cold, calculating. "Well, well, if it isn't the young director himself," Reed said, his tone dripping with condescension. "What brings the FBI all the way down here? Not planning to meddle in our affairs, are you?" Daniel stiffened but kept his expression neutral. "Just enjoying the evening, Chief Reed. Thought it would be good to meet some of the people working tirelessly to keep this city running smoothly." Reed chuckled, though it lacked warmth. "Running smoothly? That's rich coming from someone who spends more time chasing headlines than criminals." He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for Daniel to hear. "You know, we don't need outsiders telling us how to do our jobs, especially not people like you." The last three words hung in the air like poison, sharp and unmistakable. "People like you." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to let Reed see him flinch. Instead, he raised an eyebrow coolly. "And what kind of people might those be, Chief?" Grayson interjected, sensing the tension building between them. "Let's not get sidetracked, gentlemen. This is supposed to be a celebration after all." He offered a thin-lipped smile, though his eyes betrayed amusement at Daniel's discomfort. Forcing himself to relax, Daniel took a sip of his drink and shrugged casually. "Of course, wouldn't want to ruin the mood. Enjoy your evening, gentlemen." As he walked away, Daniel's mind raced. Was Reed implying what he thought he was implying? Or was it merely a veiled insult meant to rattle him? Either way, the message was clear. Reed and his cronies saw Daniel as an outsider, someone unworthy of respect or consideration. Worse still, they believed they were untouchable. Back at his table, Daniel tried to focus on the speeches unfolding on stage. Various officials praised the department's achievements, glossing over any controversies with practiced ease. But Daniel barely heard a word. His thoughts kept returning to Reed's comment and the simmering anger it ignited within him. He hadn't risen to the top of the FBI to be dismissed or humiliated by anyone, least of all a corrupt cop hiding behind a badge. By the time dessert was served, Daniel decided it was time to leave. He exchanged a few final pleasantries with Mayor Carter and other guests before slipping out unnoticed. Stepping into the cool night air, he felt a mix of relief and frustration wash over him. The gala had been enlightening, though not in the way he'd hoped. Rather than finding allies or gaining insight, he'd encountered hostility disguised as charm, and now, thanks to Reed's thinly veiled racism, Daniel's resolve hardened like steel. On the drive home, Daniel replayed the evening in his mind, dissecting every interaction, every glance, every word. He realized something important. Reed's disdain wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Men like Reed thrived on fear and intimidation, using their positions of power to silence dissent and protect their interests. But Daniel wasn't afraid. In fact, Reed's arrogance gave him exactly what he needed: motivation. When Daniel arrived home, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat down at his desk. Pulling out a notebook, he began jotting down notes about the gala, focusing on Reed's behavior and the subtle hints dropped throughout the night. Something about the chief's confidence struck him as odd. Why would a man with nothing to hide act so defensive? What secrets was he trying so desperately to guard? Before going to bed, Daniel made a silent vow. He wouldn't let Reed's insult go unanswered. More importantly, he wouldn't let the injustices plaguing Silver City remain buried. If the police department thought they could operate above the law, they were sorely mistaken. Daniel Harper wasn't just an outsider. They were about to discover that he was also their worst nightmare. Little did Reed know, his attempt to humiliate Daniel had only lit a fire beneath him. A fire that would soon engulf the entire department, exposing the rot festering within its ranks. The morning after the gala, Daniel Harper woke up with a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. He couldn't shake off Chief Reed's words, or the look in his eyes when he said, "People like you." That phrase echoed in Daniel's mind like a challenge, a dare to prove him wrong. Sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, Daniel stared out the window at the quiet streets below. For years, he had dedicated himself to justice, but now it felt personal. This wasn't just about doing his job anymore. It was about standing up against people who thought they were untouchable. Daniel knew where to start. The Silver City Police Department may have seemed impenetrable, but every fortress had cracks if you looked hard enough. His first step was simple, yet crucial: gathering information. Back at FBI headquarters, Daniel requested access to all complaints filed against the department over the past decade. He also pulled records of lawsuits, settlements, and internal investigations. What he found shocked even him. The files painted a grim picture. Dozens of reports detailed allegations of excessive force, racial profiling, and wrongful arrests, most involving Black and Latino citizens. Many cases were dismissed without explanation, while others mysteriously disappeared altogether. In one instance, a young man named Marcus Johnson claimed officers planted drugs on him during a traffic stop. Witnesses corroborated his story, but the charges stuck anyway. A few months later, Marcus died under suspicious circumstances while in custody. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, but family members insisted otherwise. As Daniel sifted through, the documents' patterns emerged. Officers repeatedly used vague language in their reports, such as resisting arrest or acting aggressively, to justify brutal tactics. Some victims reported being beaten so badly they required hospitalization. Others described being handcuffed for hours without explanation. And then there were the deaths, too many to ignore. Several individuals had died following encounters, with police often labeled as accidents or natural causes despite conflicting evidence. One name kept appearing: Officer Derek Malone. Known for his aggressive approach, Malone had racked up more citizen complaints than anyone else on the force. Yet instead of facing consequences, he received promotions and commendations. Reading through his file, Daniel noticed something peculiar. Whenever accusations arose against Malone, they vanished shortly afterward. It was almost as if someone higher up intervened to protect him. Determined to dig deeper, Daniel assembled a small team of trusted agents. These were men and women who shared his values and understood the gravity of the situation. Among them was Agent Lisa Chen, a brilliant investigator with a knack for uncovering hidden connections. Together they began piecing together testimonies from former officers, whistleblowers, and victims' families. Slowly, a disturbing narrative took shape. One evening, Lisa approached Daniel with a breakthrough. She'd tracked down an ex-officer named Greg Lawson, who agreed to meet them secretly. Lawson had served under Chief Reed for nearly 20 years before resigning abruptly 3 years ago. Rumor had it he left because of disagreements with leadership, though no one knew for sure. Meeting in a dimly lit diner outside the city limits, Lawson appeared nervous but resolute. I didn't want to say anything at first, Lawson admitted, stirring sugar into his coffee. But I can't live with myself knowing what I know. Over. The next hour, Lawson revealed shocking details about the department's inner workings. According to him, Chief Reed and Deputy Commissioner Grayson ran a tight ship, using fear and loyalty to maintain control. Officers who questioned orders risked losing their jobs, or worse. Those who followed blindly reaped rewards, including promotions and bonuses. They don't care about justice, Lawson said bitterly. It's all about power. If you're not part of their circle, you're expendable. Lawson went on to describe specific incidents including fabricated evidence, coerced confessions, and deliberate destruction of surveillance footage. One case stood out above the rest. The death of Jamal Carter, a teenager shot multiple times during a routine traffic stop. Official reports claimed Jamal resisted arrest and reached for a weapon, but Lawson swore he saw the gun planted afterward. When asked why he hadn't spoken up earlier, Lawson sighed heavily. I tried once, he confessed. They threatened my family, told me I'd regret opening my mouth. After that, I kept quiet. Until now. Listening to Lawson's account, Daniel felt anger bubbling inside him. This wasn't just corruption. It was systemic oppression designed to crush anyone who dared oppose it. Still, he needed concrete proof to expose the truth. Surveillance cameras, body cam footage, and audio recordings could provide the evidence necessary to dismantle the entire operation. Using Lawson's tips, Daniel and his team launched a covert investigation. They scoured public databases, analyzed social media posts, and reviewed archived news articles. Every lead brought them closer to unraveling the tangled web of deceit spun by Reed and Grayson. Late nights turned into early mornings as they pored over data, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. Their efforts paid off when Lisa stumbled upon a key piece of evidence, a deleted email recovered from an old server. Sent by Deputy Commissioner Grayson, the message instructed officers to alter witness statements in a high-profile case involving a wealthy white businessman accused of assaulting a Latina employee. The original statement implicated the businessman, but the revised version shifted blame onto the victim. Attached to the email was a list of similar cases where evidence had been tampered with or destroyed entirely. This is it, Lisa whispered, handing the printout to Daniel. This proves they're manipulating the system. With mounting excitement and dread, Daniel realized they were sitting on a powder keg. Exposing this level of corruption wouldn't be easy. People in positions of power rarely gave up without a fight, and Chief Reed was no exception. But Daniel refused to back down. He owed it to everyone who suffered silently, to Jamal, Marcus, and countless others whose lives were ruined or cut short by injustice. Before taking action, Daniel decided to test the waters. He reached out to trusted journalists and civil rights organizations, sharing preliminary findings in confidence. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage, but all agreed the information was explosive. If handled correctly, it could spark nationwide reform within law enforcement agencies. Meanwhile, Daniel continued building his case, ensuring every detail was airtight. He interviewed more witnesses, secured additional testimonies, and gathered physical evidence wherever possible. Each discovery reinforced his belief that exposing the truth was worth whatever sacrifices lay ahead. Yet, even as momentum grew, Daniel remained cautious. He knew Chief Reed and Grayson wouldn't go quietly. Already rumors swirled about his investigation, prompting anonymous threats and veiled warnings. One night, returning home late, Daniel found a note taped to his front door. Back off or you'll regret it. Shaking his head, Daniel crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash. Threats like these only strengthened his resolve. He wasn't fighting for himself, he was fighting for justice, for those who couldn't fight back. No amount of intimidation would stop him now. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's investigation expanded beyond Silver City. Connections surfaced linking the department to other corrupt agencies across the state. It became clear that Reed and Grayson weren't isolated bad apples. They were part of a larger network designed to protect privilege and suppress dissent. The scope of the conspiracy terrified Daniel, but it also fueled his determination. By the time autumn rolled around, Daniel's team had amassed an overwhelming amount of evidence. Surveillance video showed officers planting weapons, audio recordings captured incriminating conversations, and documents exposed falsified reports. Everything pointed to one undeniable conclusion. The Silver City Police Department was rotten to its core. Standing in his office late one evening, surrounded by stacks of files and glowing computer screens, Daniel allowed himself a moment of reflection. The road ahead would be treacherous, filled with obstacles and enemies determined to silence him. But for the first time in months, he felt hope. Hope that the truth would finally come to light. Hope that justice could prevail, even in the darkest corners of society. Chief Reed thought he could humiliate Daniel into submission. Instead, he ignited a fire that would burn brighter than either of them could have imagined. As Daniel Harper prepared to take his findings public, the weight of what he was about to do pressed heavily on his shoulders. He knew this wasn't just a fight against Chief Reed and Deputy Commissioner Grayson. It was a battle against an entire system designed to protect itself at all costs. But Daniel had reached a point where turning back wasn't an option. The evidence in front of him was too damning, the stories too heartbreaking, and the stakes too high. The first sign that trouble was brewing came late one evening when Daniel received a call from Agent Lisa Chen. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "We've got a problem," she said. "Someone leaked our investigation details to the department." Daniel's heart sank. While they had been careful to keep their work under wraps, it seemed their efforts hadn't been enough. Word traveled fast in law enforcement circles, especially among those who stood to lose everything if exposed. Within hours, whispers turned into outright accusations. Chief Reed called an emergency press conference, denying any wrongdoing and accusing Daniel of conducting a politically motivated witch hunt. "They're trying to discredit us before we even make our move," Lisa said, pacing nervously in Daniel's office. "What do we do?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had expected resistance, but not this quickly. "We stick to the plan," he replied firmly. "They're panicking because they know we're onto something. That means we're on the right track." Still, the pressure mounted. Anonymous threats poured in daily. Phone calls, emails, even graffiti scrawled across the walls of FBI headquarters, warning Daniel to stop digging. At home, he found slashed tires on his car and dead animals left on his doorstep. It was clear that Chief Reed and his allies weren't going to go down without a fight. They were sending a message: back off or face the consequences. But Daniel refused to be intimidated. Instead, he doubled down on his efforts. With Lisa's help, he compiled every piece of evidence into a comprehensive report detailing years of corruption within the Silver City Police Department. The document included everything: the falsified reports, the tampered surveillance footage, the altered witness statements, and the chilling testimonies from victims' families. Each page painted a horrifying picture of systemic racism and abuse of power. Knowing the risks involved, Daniel decided to share parts of the report with trusted journalists and civil rights organizations. If anything happened to him, or if someone tried to bury the truth, they would have copies to ensure the story got out. Among those he contacted was Rachel Myers, an investigative reporter known for her fearless exposés on police misconduct. Rachel listened intently as Daniel explained the situation, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "This is huge," she said finally. "If you're willing to go public with this, I'll publish everything. But you need to understand it's going to get ugly." Daniel nodded grimly. "It already is." With Rachel on board, Daniel began planning his next move. He arranged a meeting with federal prosecutors to discuss potential charges against Chief Reed, Deputy Commissioner Grayson, and several other high-ranking officers implicated in the scandal. Armed with irrefutable evidence, he hoped to secure indictments before the department could orchestrate a cover-up. However, Chief Reed wasn't idle. Realizing that Daniel's investigation posed an existential threat, he launched a smear campaign aimed at discrediting him publicly. Local newspapers ran articles questioning Daniel's motives, painting him as a self-serving opportunist hungry for fame. Television pundits echoed these sentiments, speculating that his actions were driven by personal grievances rather than genuine concern for justice. Even some colleagues within the FBI expressed skepticism, urging Daniel to tread carefully. "You're making enemies, Daniel," one senior agent warned during a tense meeting. "People are starting to ask questions about your loyalty, your judgment. Are you sure this is worth it?" Daniel stared at the man calmly. "Worth it? Yes. Justice isn't supposed to be easy. If I don't stand up now, who will?" Despite the mounting pressure, Daniel remained steadfast. He knew that exposing corruption required sacrifice, and he was ready to bear the burden. What kept him going were the faces of those he sought to protect: the grieving mothers, the wrongfully imprisoned fathers, the young men whose lives were stolen far too soon. Their voices echoed in his mind, urging him forward. Then came the breakthrough. During a routine review of surveillance footage, Lisa stumbled upon something extraordinary. Hidden deep within archived files was a grainy recording of Chief Reed speaking candidly with Officer Derek Malone. In the video, Reed admitted to altering evidence in multiple cases involving minority suspects. His exact words sent chills down Daniel's spine. "We can't let them win. Make sure the paperwork matches the narrative." Lisa gasped as she replayed the clip. "This is it, Daniel. This is the smoking gun." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The implications of the recording were staggering. Not only did it confirm Reed's involvement in widespread corruption, but it also provided undeniable proof of his intent to deceive. With this evidence, Daniel could shatter the facade Reed had built around himself. But getting access to the original file proved difficult. Someone had deliberately buried it deep within outdated servers, likely hoping no one would ever find it. After days of painstaking effort, Daniel's team managed to retrieve a clean copy. Once secured, they stored it in multiple encrypted locations. To prevent tampering, armed with the video and mountains of supporting evidence, Daniel scheduled a private meeting with Attorney General Patricia Monroe. A stern yet fair-minded woman, Monroe had earned a reputation for pursuing justice regardless of political fallout. As Daniel laid out the case against Reed and his accomplices, Monroe listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes. When he finished, she looked up, her expression unreadable. "You realize what you're asking me to do, don't you?" she asked quietly. "This isn't just about arresting a few bad cops. This is about dismantling an entire institution." "I'm aware," Daniel replied, "but institutions are made up of people. And when those people betray the trust placed in them, it's our duty to hold them accountable." Monroe studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, let's bring them down." With the Attorney General's backing, Daniel prepared for the final showdown. He called a press conference scheduled for the following week, inviting reporters from major news outlets across the country. Anticipation buzzed in the air as word spread about the FBI director's mysterious announcement. Chief Reed and Grayson scrambled to contain the damage, issuing statements dismissing the allegations as baseless attacks. But behind closed doors, panic set in. On the morning of the press conference, Daniel woke up early, his stomach tight with nerves. He dressed carefully, choosing a dark suit and tie, a symbol of authority and resolve. As he drove to the venue, he rehearsed his speech in his head, ensuring every word conveyed both strength and compassion. The room was packed when Daniel arrived, filled with cameras, microphones, and expectant faces. Reporters jostled for position, eager to capture the moment. Standing at the podium, Daniel took a deep breath and began. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Today I stand before you not as an FBI director, but as a servant of justice. Over the past several months, my team and I have uncovered evidence of systemic corruption within the Silver City Police Department, a pattern of racial profiling, excessive force, and deliberate obstruction of justice that has gone unchecked for far too long." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Daniel continued. He outlined key findings from the investigation, presenting documents, videos, and testimonies to support his claims. Then he played the incriminating recording of Chief Reed admitting to tampering with evidence. Gasps erupted throughout the room as the chilling audio reverberated off the walls. By the time Daniel concluded his remarks, the atmosphere was electric. Phones buzzed incessantly as reporters filed stories, while social media exploded with reactions. Outside the building, protesters gathered, chanting slogans demanding accountability and reform. Chief Reed and Grayson watched the chaos unfold on television, their faces pale with disbelief. Within hours, federal agents arrested both men, along with several other officers implicated in the scandal. Search warrants executed at police headquarters uncovered additional evidence corroborating Daniel's findings. The nation watched in stunned silence as decades of corruption unraveled before their eyes. Though vindicated, Daniel felt no triumph, only relief that the truth had finally seen the light of day. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, hope flickered in the hearts of those who had suffered silently for so long. And standing at the center of it all was Daniel Harper, a man who refused to bow to fear or intimidation, a man determined to prove that justice, no matter how delayed, was never truly denied. The days following the press conference were a whirlwind of emotions for Daniel Harper. The nation was gripped by outrage and disbelief as the full extent of the corruption within the Silver City Police Department came to light. News outlets replayed snippets of Chief Reed's incriminating recording over and over, while social media erupted with hashtags like "Justice for Silver City" and "No More Silence." Protesters filled the streets holding signs that read, "Accountability Now" and "Black Lives Matter." It seemed everyone had something to say about the scandal. But for Daniel, the noise was both validating and overwhelming. At first, there was a sense of vindication. Federal prosecutors moved swiftly, charging Chief Marcus Reed, Deputy Commissioner Harold Grayson, and nearly 24 other officers with crimes ranging from evidence tampering to manslaughter. Courtrooms buzzed with activity as families finally had their day in court, sharing stories they had kept hidden for years out of fear or despair. Many described how their loved ones had been wrongfully accused, beaten, or killed, and how the system had failed them repeatedly. For the first time, these voices weren't ignored. They were heard loud and clear. But not everyone celebrated Daniel's victory. Chief Reed and his allies fought back fiercely, launching counterattacks aimed at discrediting him and undermining the investigation. Their lawyers argued that the evidence was circumstantial, claiming it had been manipulated or taken out of context. Some supporters even went so far as to accuse Daniel of orchestrating a political vendetta against law enforcement. Despite their efforts, however, the mountain of irrefutable proof made it impossible to deny the truth. Amidst the legal battles, Daniel faced mounting personal challenges. Anonymous threats escalated, forcing him to hire private security for himself and his family. His phone rang constantly with calls from angry citizens, some accusing him of betraying the badge, others praising him for exposing the rot. Strangers stopped him on the street, some shaking his hand in gratitude, others glaring at him with thinly veiled hostility. Even within the FBI, opinions were divided. While many colleagues admired his courage, others whispered behind closed doors, questioning whether he'd gone too far. Despite the backlash, Daniel remained resolute. He knew this fight wasn't just about punishing corrupt individuals. It was about dismantling a toxic culture that allowed such abuses to thrive. In the first place, with the support of Attorney General Patricia Monroe, he pushed for sweeping reforms across law enforcement agencies nationwide. These included mandatory body cameras, independent oversight boards, stricter accountability measures, and training programs focused on racial sensitivity and de-escalation tactics. Slowly but surely, change began to take root. One of the most poignant moments came during a town hall meeting held in Silver City itself. Hundreds of residents packed into a community center, eager to voice their thoughts about what had happened and what needed to happen next. Victims' families sat, side by side with activists, local leaders, and concerned citizens united by a shared desire for justice. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood before the crowd, humbled by the weight of their expectations. "I didn't do this alone," he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "This victory belongs to all of you, to those who spoke up when no one else would listen, To those who refused to let fear silence them, and to those whose lives were stolen because the system failed them, we've exposed the darkness, but now we must work together to bring light. His words earned a standing ovation, but Daniel knew real progress wouldn't come overnight. Rebuilding trust between the police and the community would take years, if not decades. Old habits die hard, and resistance to change ran deep. Still, he found solace in knowing that the first step, the hardest step, had been taken. As months turned into years, the impact of Daniel's actions rippled outward. Other cities began investigating their own police departments, inspired by the courage shown in Silver City. Civil rights organizations gained momentum, advocating for policies that prioritized transparency and equity. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at addressing systemic racism, though passing them proved challenging in a deeply polarized political climate. Yet, every small victory fueled hope that lasting reform was possible. On a personal level, Daniel struggled to find balance after the storm. The stress of the investigation had taken its toll, leaving him physically and emotionally drained. Friends urged him to take time off, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to step away entirely. Instead, he threw himself into mentoring young agents, teaching them the importance of integrity and perseverance. He often reminded them of the lessons he'd learned growing up in Silver Ridge. Justice isn't about winning or losing, it's about making sure no one feels invisible anymore. In quieter moments, Daniel reflected on how far he'd come since that fateful gala where Chief Reed tried to humiliate him. What started as a personal affront had grown into a crusade for truth and accountability. Though he never sought fame or recognition, Daniel became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person could make a difference. Years later, as he stood on stage accepting an award for public service, Daniel thought back to Jamal, the childhood friend whose disappearance had sparked his journey toward justice. He imagined what Jamal might have said if he were still alive. "You did good, Danny, keep going." And so Daniel kept going, not because he wanted glory, but because he believed in a better future. One where no child grew up fearing the knock on the door late at night. One where no parent had to bury their child because someone abused their power. One where justice wasn't a privilege reserved for the few, but a right afforded to all. Though the scars of the past lingered, Daniel carried them proudly, as reminders of the battles fought and won. The road ahead would always be uncertain, paved with obstacles and setbacks. But Daniel Harper had proven something invaluable. Courage, determination, and an unshakable moral compass could shine a light even in the darkest corners of society. And sometimes, that light was enough to ignite a revolution.